We're back here on Bills by the Numbers, where we let the stats tell you where the Bills are at. We're presented by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Coming up, the Bills got one of the members of their young core signed to an extension. Who could be next on the list? How many extensions are realistic through the course of just one offseason? And what veteran could be a cap casualty at their expense? We're also going to talk to ESPN's Field Yates, and we'll have our one burning question. Anyone got an APB on the Brinks truck? Glad you could join us here on this special NFL Combine edition of Bills by the Numbers. Bills Hall of Famer Steve Tasker, Bills play-by-play man Chris Brown with you. And here at the end of February is where the rubber meets the road for NFL general managers as they make their final efforts to get their clubs cap compliant. This year's deadline is March 12, 4 p.m., when their top 51 salaries must be under at least $277.5 million or $281.5 million, or somewhere in between. Some clubs have already begun the process of releasing players outright and restructuring the contracts of others. Another means by which to reduce a club's cap burden is to sign a player or two to contract extensions. They don't always provide immediate cap relief, but they can be structured in such a way, as you know, Steve, to ease the cap burden. Khalil Shakir, the first member of the team's young core to sign a contract extension, 4-year deal with just over $60 million this week. According to reports, his total pay in year one will be $18 million. So we'll have to see how the payouts are structured and what's bonus and when it's paid out, and what the base salary is, to know what the true cap hit is for 2025. But what is your reaction to this deal getting done first and foremost?
Yeah, it's one of the dominoes we expect to fall, no question about it. Benford, Bernard, Rousseau, along with those. Not unexpected for me. I think probably the reason he got his done first was that he was amiable to the numbers. They said, yeah, he goes, you know what, I think you're right. I'm going to sign the deal. And it's a life changer, no question about it. This contract, there's, for however it's structured, is part of an overall plan. I mean, they've got guys lined up, they've got numbers and ranges, so Khalil's falls into that, whether it was Bernard or Rousseau or anybody else who they signed, even free agency. This is all part of a large-scale plan they've got to get cap compliant. The other dominoes are going to start to fall in short order.
I think what also made this doable this early in the process was also the fact that they knew Shakir wasn't going to be commanding top 10 money at his position.
Sure.
So I think that makes it easier on both sides to get to a place where you can agree, you know what, this is fair for the team, this is fair for me, let me sign. And that's where they kind of came down. I don't think it was too much unlike some other extensions we've seen. The Spencer Brown extension was something that was doable. Right tackle, not going to break the bank. You can get it done.
Milano, same thing.
Some of the other contracts coming up here might be of a different sort, and we'll get into that in just a second.
Right.
Cook's deal, I think we believe, is going to take some time, and we'll get to that in a minute here. Shakir's contract doesn't appear on the surface to help the cap burden and move the team closer to cap compliance. But GM Brandon Beane already told us this week that they have had talks with James Cook's representatives. And while they're not in the range simultaneously of where they want to be, Bills want to be in one place, Cook wants to be somewhere else in terms of average annual value, I think they're going to get there in time. At least that's the spin that Beane kind of put on it. So might this be a deal that you think could stretch into the summer and doesn't impact cap compliancy?
Yeah, and I'll say this about the Shakir thing. From my own experience, too, there's a group of guys. Everybody approaches their own contract differently as a player. There's a lot of guys who say, I just want to get this thing done. I know it's a life changer no matter. And a Shakir strikes me as a guy who says, let's get this out of the way. I got things I got to do. Not that the money's not important, but it's going to be a life-changing contract. You can see the numbers. You can imagine even if Shakir started way up here and they started way down here, he's got to be very happy with the numbers. His life's never going to be the same.
Yeah, more than half the money's guaranteed.
Right. Yeah, that was it for him.
32 of the 60 is guaranteed.
This may have gotten done because Khalil said, "Let's do it now. I want to get it done." And whatever you might have been off, I could have squeezed out a few, figures more, but I want to get it done. There's some of that going on here. But the Cook thing obviously has a few more earmarks of maybe being a little bit more contentious on either side. Certainly, as a running back, you got to make hay while the sun shines. Careers are short; they end fast, and it's hard to come back and play hard in a league after you've made a great buck as a top back in the NFL. Come back and play for, 20% of that. It's hard to dredge up the desire to do that. So guys got to make it while they can make it, and representations for these guys know that.
Yes, and I think what's at work here, because you always think about, all right, well, who has leverage, okay? And I understand why Cook wants to get to this second contract sooner rather than later. To your point, running back careers are short on average. All you are is one major knee injury away from your career changing completely. But at the same time, he's got another year left on his rookie deal. Yeah. So he doesn't have the leverage of going to market in the middle of March. That's not there. So I think that affords the Bills time, if they feel they need it, to get to a middle ground. You're not under pressure. What is it? It's the end of February right now. We're less than 2 weeks away from the start of free agency. That pressure doesn't exist as far as the Cook contract's concerned, because he's got another year left on his rookie deal. So I think that affords them the time to kind of massage this a little bit and get to a place where they can find a middle ground and reach a compromise, whether that's in April, whether that's in August, whenever it is, they have the time. That's the benefit to the Bills, at least, as I see.
Yeah, the Bills, yes. You can ask the Bills to come to the table, but you have no leverage to get them there. And certainly Cook, I mean, he's going to be making a good buck this year at $5 million, although it is well below his market value. He's still going to be that guy on this team with a shot at the ring. So if he wants to bet on himself and be a huge factor in a team that goes to and maybe wins a Super Bowl, like the Bills, are in that conversation, this is the time to do that as well. So both these sides, I think it's smart of Cook to open the conversation and say he's desirous to stay here, but he wants to be paid his market value. And the Bills are wise to open up a conversation with his representation. Yeah. But there's, like you said, there's no ticking clock. That clock's ticking very slowly.
So if Cook's deal is going to take some time, you still have young players like Christian Benford, Terrell Bernard, and Greg Rousseau. Brandon Beane told us on our daily show, One Bills Live this week, that other contract extensions could be structured in such a way to provide cap relief. So looking at that, who do you think could be next in line for a contract extension from this team's young core, if you had to handicap it? Benford, Bernard, Rousseau are the other three.
Probably Rousseau, because he's not going to command top dollar either, like Shakir. Good money, life-changing money, but it's not going to be a $25 million a year contract. Rousseau has yet to get double-digit sacks. He has gotten incrementally better. He's been a solid player, and at times made fantastic plays, but there have been times when he's been inconsistent. He's been a dog. He's played when he hasn't felt great. He's been playing through injuries at certain times in his career. He's done everything the club has asked him to do, but he has not reached a zenith of being a game wrecker. You're not going to pay him like that.
How we doing, Coach?
Coach, how you doing?
Did you miss me?
We do.
A little bit,
We do. Yes, we do. Yeah. Are you staying busy during training camp?
We're taping our podcast, Bills by the Numbers. Welcome. Glad to have you.
Tell us, and I know you.
We're talking contract extensions.
Put this on.
Now that
give us about 4 sentences about Khalil Shakir and how happy you are about his contract and these young guys.
Extremely happy. Classic case of humble worker, team player, getting rewarded for all of what I just said, doing his job and just being all about the team and performing, right? So on a consistent basis. And, obviously he and Josh have a great rapport and they've done a lot of great things together.
Yeah. One last one. This is more serious. Compared this year, because now you're you're one of these veteran head coaches, you know, the competition committee, all that. So you've been around the block a bunch. Compare the tension or the level of angst in your building with you and Brandon getting under the cap this year compared to these last couple of years. Well, last year it was heartfelt.
A lot of tough decitions.
Heartfelt last year. This year it doesn't seem to be that, but still some tough decisions.
Well, anytime you've got a quarterback like we do, there's going to be a certain amount of cap space taken up by that quarterback,
Sure.
which is right and natural. So that's good, but it's also then a challenge.
Yeah.
And so, having said all that, I think managing the cap is huge, and getting us to where we can field a team and a good team. Certainly around our quarterback and around his situation with the cap, to give us a chance to win. And hopefully this year, certainly this year should be better than last year and potentially even the year before. I think last year maybe we were probably call it the tightest, maybe, if you will.
Yeah.
And I'm not as versed on it certainly as Brandon and Jim are, and Kevin, but hopefully we're on the upswing from here.
Right. Good stuff.
Right,
What's your agenda for today?
Well, I've got a couple other commitments other than you guys.
Oh,
so
seriously?
You're not the only people I came
we
over
can
to
pull
see.
a chair up.
Unfortunately.
Yeah, sorry we didn't have the chair
We'll
at the
get
ready
some-
for you.
we can get you
I
some
apologize
coffee.
for that.
We'll get you some coffee,
Not
breakfast
that you
sandwich
sit
or
down
something.
for much of anything.
Well,
anyway.
I just came in and I was on my way to my other appointment, and I
Yeah.
saw you guys.
Yeah,
and
and we
figured-
hijacked you, so sorry about
Well,
that.
I wanted to come over and kind of
Yeah, it's good
photobomb or
stuff.
whatever it's called.
Yeah,
So-
Totally
great.
fine.
All
Thank
right,
you for the
Coach.
time,
Okay.
Coach. Get
Enjoy
to
the
your other
time.
business.
Enjoy
Thank
the
you.
day.
All right, that's Coach McDermott, an impromptu visit. Wasn't expecting that, but there it
Yeah.
is. And look at you getting some insight. Look at you at the ready with like 2-3 ready questions at the drop of a hat. Amazing.
Yeah.
Absolutely amazing.
Well, it's timely, too, because he's right. You want to extend guys that deepen your culture and are
Yes.
still very, very productive. Khalil is, if you're talking about that, he's the heartbeat of that.
Yeah. And look, you feel like Rousseau could be next in line.
Yeah.
I'm not sure about that. And
Yeah.
I'll tell you why I feel differently. I feel Rousseau is a very similar case to Ed Oliver. If you remember, they had Ed Oliver play on his fifth-year option year, made him perform,
Yeah.
and really show himself before he got his big contract. I think Rousseau's in a similar boat here. It's not like Rousseau's making peanuts this year. He's going to make 13+ on his fifth-year option. I think that's a perfect number for a guy coming off an 8-sack season who you want to see if he can give you a little bit more in year 5. And so I'm going to give you the guy I think that will
Who
be
is it?
next. I'm going to go Terrell Bernard here.
Yeah.
Defensive captain, doing all the right things.
Yeah,
and
that's
he's
right.
not playing at a position that kills you on the money.
That's right.
Linebacker
That's like
salaries
Rousseau as well. Yeah, that's
linebacker
right.
salaries far lower than a cornerback salary for Benford, than a pass rusher salary like Rousseau. I think Bernard's got a good shot to get a contract extension here this offseason. Maybe not necessarily next, but somewhere here along the line between now and August, I think he's the next guy in line to get a deal for some of those reasons.
Yeah, I think you're right. That's a good point by you. It could be either one of those guys, but those are the two best candidates, I think. You're right.
All right, so now let's finally ask ourselves, how many extensions do you think get handed out to these young core players? We just heard Coach say it. They're not as tight on the cap with constraints as they were last year or even the year before, but we know as well as anybody, there are some tough decisions that are still going to have to be made. What are you doing with Von Miller? He's an $8.5 million cap savings. If you let him go, that's nothing to sneeze at when you're trying to save some money here. And there are some other players in the mix too. Mitch Trubisky, Sam Martin, some other players that represent cap savings. And we're just mentioning them because from a business perspective, they represent a significant cap
Right.
savings. So that aside, realistically, how many extensions can you hand out knowing you got to sign some free agents to refortify your roster? You got a rookie pool that could have as many as 10 players in it. Like, how many more extensions are we looking at here?
No more than 3.
Are you counting Shakir in that? You're
Yeah.
saying Shakir and 2
Yeah.
more?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think only
Yeah.
2 more at most.
Yeah, at most. Maybe just 1. Rousseau's a candidate, like you said, to play out that last year of his contract. And I was going to – it's interesting that they made Ed Oliver play his 5th year. I wonder how much they can sell a player like Rousseau. They can probably sell him on
He's
the
not
fact
making peanuts.
Right. Said, listen, if you bust out this year, what are we going to do? Franchise you, or we got to sign you to big money?
Well, I think they just say to him, hey, look, you saw what we did with Ed.
That's right.
You're next in line.
Ed bet on himself and got his extension. A guy like Tremaine Edmonds did not get an extension, but he got good money on the open market. So
Tremaine didn't even get a fifth-year option.
Getting to free agency is always enticing for a player. Always. That's where the money is. The Bills would be smart to dangle that out there for Guy Rousseau, even Benford, and as well, because if Christian Benford gets out there, so he may be as prime a candidate as Rousseau and Bernard are. Those are the three left. I don't know that all of those guys get done.
Now let's not forget, Benford has a little bit of a concussion history, and do they want to let that season play out this year before handing him big money? I think that's something to consider. And we where we sit, don't know his medical future as well as people in the athletic training department, the medical department, and the football department know it. But it does bear watching.
Yeah.
He had 2 concussions in
right
close proximity to one another. And, obviously we wish and hope the best for Christian going forward. But you have another one early this season. You wonder what the lingering effects are, and does that impact your decision on handing him a contract extension? It could. We're just speculating. We don't know that, but it's something to bring up. I think it's worth bringing up.
Here's the thing, too. If your medical people say he's okay, you're going to take their word and going to get.
Yes. But we don't know what that opinion is, and that's why I think it's worth bringing up as something to discuss. All right, time now to welcome in our guest on this special NFL Combine edition of Bills by the Numbers to talk Bills cap, contract extensions, and an initial look at NFL free agency. It's our good friend from ESPN, NFL analyst Field Yates. Okay, Field, we're talking Bills contract extensions for members of the young core. GM Brandon Beane indicated in the wake of Shakir's extension that more could be on the horizon, some that may even be structured to provide some cap relief, knowing the Bills are over the cap now and have some work to do just to get cap compliant. What do you think is realistic, though, in terms of how many extensions they can get done in one offseason? Because you're talking Terrell Bernard, Christian Benford, Greg Rousseau on a 5th-year option. What's realistic?
And, of course, Shakir.
Yep, Shakir now done, which is great. I hope that the two of you got the long-term deals as well. Does this go hand in hand with Shakir or no?
We're more year to year
we're good till about 3 o'clock every day. The rest is a roll of the dice.
My favorite show to come on. I think the most obvious one is Greg Rousseau to start because of this factor. It's the biggest cap number, right? Like if you're trying to get cap compliance, the best way to do so is to take those big numbers and chop them down, which can be easily done when you have a player that has merited a contract extension and that, especially the homegrown guys, right? So Rousseau would be the most obvious one because the other guys have smaller numbers that are less prohibitive in terms of getting cap compliant or potentially creating space. I probably should have started, though, and the truth is this. The most important deal that they can do this offseason, in my opinion, is Josh Allen, right? Josh has reached the point where because of the way that they moved some money around last year, Josh is now underpaid going forward. And not like Josh is going to leave, right? Like Josh is not going to threaten to leave.
Sure.
But it's so important to have your quarterback deal figured out because it allows you to shape the rest of the roster. Like the most important deal they can have at all times is Josh Allen's accounted for. And until you know where Josh's deal is going to check in at, it can influence how the rest of your roster is constructed.
Once you've got a guy like Josh, and he's signed through 2028, and you can only go 5 years into the future in the NFL, right? So it does make some sense to have that guy either with a couple of years you can go into or at a point where you can just guarantee more money perhaps here. And so those big quarterback contracts, while they do take a chunk off, they also allow you to manipulate those numbers within that contract and stay flexible with your other roster.
And the most important part is you have clarity going forward. So you can say to yourself, all right, well, if we have Josh as taken care of, then you can more accurately assess, all right, if we want to get Greg done at this number, how much does that leave for James or Terrell Bernard, whoever it might be, Benford, like guys who have helped you win a lot of football games, right? And in the case of several of those guys play like really indispensable positions within this roster and the way that it's constructed. So I think Josh is always going to be, to me, the most important deal to have accounted for, just because it gives you clarity elsewhere on the roster.
But that's going to take time. That's not going to be an easy contract necessarily. And just to be a little bit of devil's advocate here, the last time they gave him the big money deal, his first big one after his rookie contract, it didn't happen until right before the season. They're looking for cap relief now, as you know.
That is true, yes. But I will say this. I think that they have a general sense of what it might require to get Josh past the goal line for an extension.
Okay.
I just don't think that a quarterback who is this close to the organization, this embedded with the city and this franchise, right? Who
shouldn't be as arduous as it was the last time.
You'd imagine this one, they'll find middle ground. It will take some effort.
But he is the MVP.
Yes. Yeah.
So there is that as well.
You got leverage for sure.
Also, is this you look at the other guys? We've been talking about Christian Benford and Terrell Bernard and Rousseau.
James Cook, too.
James Cook now as well is thrown into that now. The one player in that mix that plays a money spot is the corner. Sixth-round pick has absolutely far outpaced his draft status as a player in the National Football League. He was at times during this year, he was at the top of the league at corner.
Yeah.
That's going to be a problem contract, I think, when it does come up. How do you handle that, and what's the timing look like?
It's a really interesting debate they have right now, because I don't know. Actually, I do know. There hasn't been a better coach in the past, I'd offer 15 years, at talent maximizing in the secondary than Sean McDermott.
Yeah.
I mean, they've made it work with pretty much anybody. I mean, you could probably throw me back there, and they might not.
Levi Wallace.
It's unbelievable the job that Sean has done. Obviously, that is his bread and butter as a coach, or that's his background as a coach, I should say, is coaching up those DBs. I think Sean is a brilliant coach, but also outstanding specifically in that area. So you have to say to yourself, all right, what is the number that we're comfortable getting to? Because you want to reward guys that deserve what you are going to have to pay them. Homegrown guy who, by all accounts, I mean, a 6th-round pick out of Villanova, I can't imagine Christian Benford hasn't worked his butt off to get to where he is right now. I'm sure he is one of the guys that you say to yourself, the rest of the locker room should be inspired by what Christian Benford has done. So, but you also have to have lines in the sand. You just do. They don't pay Brandon Beane and his staff that does contract negotiations for the easy ones. They pay him for the hard ones, right? And so you got to find ways to draw lines in the sand on players, because you're saying to yourself, our history suggests that we might be able to find a guy in the 3rd or 4th round that can eventually become the next Christian Benford.
All right, so let's take this a step further, because you talk about Josh and the importance of getting that done. In his season wrap-up press conference, Coach McDermott came as close to talking about what he feels he still needs for his roster while trying his best to talk in general terms.
Yeah.
But he basically was unequivocally stating you need 2 or 3 difference makers on either side of the ball. And I would argue on offense you have Josh and James, and on defense you don't have anybody. So, elite of elite. We got a game plan for that guy. That guy's a game wrecker. Nobody on defense. Cook and Allen on offense. You're talking about an Allen extension. Can you get a Cook extension done at the same time, too?
I think you can. The cap is, the Bills have never, they've always done a good job managing the cap. I think you can find it, but here's where I think the interesting part that I've thought about for the Bills on a couple of different occasions. And in some ways, I admire the discipline and the sustained success that they have had, while acknowledging that, if they just have another 6 or 7 years that come close to the last 3 or 4 years, no one's going to be satisfied. Is there ever I hate to call it all in, because the Rams were all in, and then 2 years later they were back in the playoffs with an entirely different roster. You can push chips to the middle of the table without being all in. Is there, though, a lever to pull for Buffalo that at some point you say to yourself, yeah, you know what, a different year, a different era, we might not have been as aggressive and bullish on making a splash move, so to speak. But they don't come around all that often, and we're a team that's good enough, really is good enough. And they're not reacting to just one game. But I think the AFC felt after watching the Super Bowl that there's an opportunity here. That, for as dominant as Kansas City has been, we can get there. We can win against this team who's going to have some changes themselves.
So wait a second here, Field, because Steve and I had a very heated argument on the show last week about this very subject, where I said it might be time, with the cap going up even more than anticipated, to maybe don't deviate from how you build it every year, but maybe be this much more aggressive.
Listen, I hear that. I hear that. They were very aggressive when they went out and traded for a guy like Steph Diggs. What did that get them? Close.
Yeah.
They were very aggressive when they went out and signed a free agent with Von Miller.
Yep.
That got them close. That was close, but that didn't work out for a number of reasons, which is what you risk anytime you put more than the budget has for one guy.
Sure.
You risk it all because if that guy gets a hangnail and can't play,
right,
that whole deal is for nothing, and now you've got a future coming down the road, and it's a brick wall because of that deal that now just went down.
That's not doing it because you're afraid it's not going to work. You can't be afraid in this league, right?
Yeah, I do.
No, but you got to be smart.
Yeah.
You got to be smart, and certainly you're making these moves because you're aggressive.
Yeah.
But this is a team. They missed a fourth down spot.
Yeah. Yeah.
They lost a coin flip.
They also missed a third down spot.
They missed a third down spot, a fourth down spot. They lost a coin flip for an overtime game on the road. That you can go down the list. I mean, and that has nothing to do with this player, that player, this player, that player, that over the top guy, or this over the top, or this chip that we didn't push to the table.
That's fair. All right, so I think it's
they're going to get a swing at it again this year.
They will, no doubt. And by the way, the AFC East to me on paper looks a whole lot weaker than it did going into last year. Right, like they are comfortably the favorites in this division next year. I would just say this is maybe where I would land, and not to just sound very neutral right down the middle, because I love both of these guys, and they have been so good to me for so many years. I feel like picking between my
You don't have to pick a side.
I don't have to pick a
it's
side.
It's fine. We just need your opinion.
The responsibility that Brandon Beane has. Yeah, my opinion is I agree with whichever one of you is nicer to me off camera.
Right.
When you have a quarterback that is this just brilliant as a player, is that your eyes have to always be open. And that you should not go into the offseason with the mindset that we are going to try to jam a square peg into a round hole and go be aggressive because that's what the outside forces are telling us. But, and this is just a but, and this is just an example that to me would fit into this category. I have zero clue of how realistic it is. If T. Higgins becomes a free agent, and you say to yourself, we've got this 26-year-old, he's played in the league for 5 years, so he can't be that much older than 26. 26-year-old wide receiver who has the pedigree to be clearly the best wide receiver on this team. Do we at least have to see, can we explore it here? Vaughn, I actually think, in retrospect, the Steph move was, worth it many times over, 444 catches in 4 seasons. Yeah. Vaughn, the Vaughn one was more in the category of, we identify a window and we're willing to overspend to make it happen. I think T would be closer to Steph than it is the Vaughn deal, just because of the age trajectory for him.
Right. Yeah.
So I just think
Josh is in a different place for T. Higgins to come aboard than he was when Steph came aboard.
And by the way, T and Steph, very different dispositions, right?
Yeah.
That's just a matter of fact.
Yeah.
It's not, Steph's a great competitor and a great player, but obviously by the end of that time, it had run its course, just like it did in Minnesota, and there's a reason why he's now on his third team. So it's a fascinating dilemma that they face right now. I know it doesn't feel this way coming off of a season that ended the way that it did, but I'm sitting here thinking to myself, they're one of, 3 best teams in the league right now going into next season.
Yeah.
You're dang, you look around this media room that we're in right now and you see some teams that are we're just trying to get 5 good players on the roster. The Bills are we're trying to figure out the last, 2%
the
of
last
the equation,
5 players
right?
on the roster.
Yeah. So
Field, thanks for the time. As always, we appreciate it. Good to catch up with you here at the NFL Combine. It is, and we survived. We have one more day, but in any event, appreciate the time as always. We'll catch up with you as we get closer to the draft.
I want to come up to the compound sometime.
Absolutely. You're more than welcome anytime. Anytime.
Yeah,
we'll take you into the Sabres game. We'll get you in the suite. Have it the whole deal.
I'm in.
Thanks very much.
Thanks, guys.
All right, good conversation there with ESPN NFL analyst Field Yates. We shift to the numbers game where Steve will be quizzed on Bills contract extension history. All right. Music starting, Steve. You know what that means.
Let's
Time
go.
for the numbers game.
All right, here we go.
Let's do it. Contract extension, Bills history.
I do not feel good about this.
I went recent history.
All right.
I'm relying on your short-term memory rather than your long-term memory.
All right.
Question number 1. There was one Bills player last offseason whose rookie contract was up that was in line for extension and got one in August. Can you name that player?
I would say that would be last offseason. Spencer Brown.
Correct, Steve. Way to search the deeper recesses of your cerebral cortex.
Thank you.
1 for 1. Question number 2. There was one Bills player in 2023 who was a 4-year starter on his rookie contract, was not signed to a contract extension, and ultimately signed elsewhere. Can you name that player?
It wasn't Tremaine, right? I mean, because he was long gone. Let's say was not signed to an extension. Yes, Dane Jackson.
It was not Dane Jackson. It was Tremaine Edmonds.
It was Tremaine
Edmonds.
Edmonds.
Tremaine Edmonds,
Oh,
yes.
I thought that seemed like a lifetime ago. I
Yes.
thought that was
Dane
2 years
Jackson
ago.
was also not re-signed, but he was not a 4-year start. So he was kind of eliminated from that.
I had it.
Yeah, you had it.
I talked myself out of
You
it.
did. Question number 3. There was one Bills player in 2023 who was also a starter, still on his rookie contract, and was signed to an extension in 2023, agreeing to a 4-year, $68 million deal. Can you name that player, Steve?
Dawson Knox.
It's not Dawson Knox.
68 million.
They love
Oh,
you.
no.
They love giving you that buzzer.
He was on it. He was coming off. Was his rookie contract with the Bills?
Yes, it was.
Golly.
He's already been mentioned on this podcast.
Oh, Ed.
It's Ed Oliver, correct.
Yeah, all right.
And
Okay,
question
2 of
number
3.
4, Steve.
2 of 3, really 3 of 3, because
Yeah.
I talked myself out of the right answer. Okay, go ahead.
And Steve, there was one more Bills player in 2023 who was a starter from the day he arrived in Buffalo, signed to a contract extension in 2023, 4-year deal, $20 million. Can you name that player?
Tyler Bass.
Correct,
Yeah!
Steve. Tyler
Yeah!
Bass. Well done. 3 of 4 in the
That's what I'm
numbers
talking
game.
about, baby. Yeah.
I knew it. I was trying to be kind to you, man. Well done. Recent
I got
memory.
all 4 of those, except I talked myself out
Talked
of the
yourself
one I
out of
missed.
Tremaine. So
Oh,
you were almost
yeah.
batting 1,000 there.
I had 0 expectations on that. And I got all of them.
Not bad.
That
Not
wasn't
bad at all.
That was not bad at all.
Bills fans, get in on the action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Just download the app today to play any way you want. Plus, with live betting, you'll get updated odds on games that have already started. Best of all, you get paid your winnings fast. Make every moment more with FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of the Buffalo Bills. Time now for our one burning question. We've talked a lot about contract extensions in this episode, Steve, and we have not broached the subject of a contract extension for Josh Allen. Allen's contract sits atop the team list at a hit of $44.7 million this year. Yes, Allen's contract far below market value for the league's MVP at the quarterback position. But with this young core coming up on the end of their rookie deals, might they have to hold off on an extension for Josh until near the start of the regular season, or perhaps even next offseason?
Yeah, hold off on an extension. Yeah, maybe, but they can restructure it. You know,
They already did that last year.
Yeah, so they'll
Do it again?
Yeah, what do they do is, and what this means is, they'll just give him a veteran base minimum salary, give him
Convert more to bonus?
the salary that he is supposed to make this year, which is 44.7. Give it to him. Give him $43 million of it right now. Say, here you go, and then spread that out over what's left of the contract, and then do the exact same thing or something else next year. That's the thing about these quarterback contracts. You know the guy's not going to get cut. You know you're going to pay him whatever it takes to keep him, and if you give him the money in one lump sum at the beginning of every calendar year, so be it. That it's because of the atmosphere now, particularly with quarterbacks and where they're at, what they're making. It gives great flexibility for that. This is 16.27% of the cap. It gives you great flexibility with that money because you know the quarterback's not going. You know, if you want, you can just give it to him and he'll take it because it's in his pocket, not yours. He's already earned it. So if something happens, it doesn't matter. He's got it. So, yeah, that's one plus with the enormous quarterback contracts. They do give you great flexibility going forward because you can always restructure them.
Yeah, I just wonder which side of the fence they fall on here because we just had Coach in a cameo appearance here.
Right.
And he did briefly in passing mention
knows.
Josh's contract.
Yeah.
So it's on their radar, clearly. Josh, I don't think, is the kind of person that's busting down their door saying, hey, when am I getting mine? That's just not how he operates. He'd rather have a stronger roster around him. So if that means they have to do more restructuring on his current deal, put some money in his pocket now to say, hey, take this to tie you over. We'll get to you next year. Is that cool? Cool. Okay, great. And then they do the big giant deal next offseason.
Yeah,
I think that's a realistic
right. And
possibility.
Here's what you got to remember. He's already signed through 2029 or 2028. 2028. The longest you can go is 5 years on an NFL contract. So they will be wise to get one more year under their belt, only have 3 years left, so they can add a couple more years next year, next
or just tear it up and start over.
Right. And what they can do is, Josh, you're still due, $96 million. How about if we just guarantee another $50 million of that on top of this? So at some point you're going to get it. We just don't know when. So let us restructure this again, and we'll guarantee another 25 or 30 million of the total contract.
Yeah.
They'll do that. That's all. And Josh say, yeah, that sounds good. That's basically what happens. He gets more money long-term guaranteed, and you get more cap flexibility right this minute.
Our closing figure deals with the man with the new contract, Khalil Shakir. Part of the reason he was so deserving of a new deal was not only because he led the team in receptions and receiving yards, but he ranked third in the league in yards after the catch with 597. The only players with more, Cincinnati's Jamar Chase, who was the Triple Crown winner this year at the receiver position, and Miami's Devon Achane, of all people. And only two players with 100 targets or more last season, like Shakir, had a higher catch rate than the Bills slot receiver, who had a catch rate of 76%. Those players, Detroit's Amon-Ra St. Brown and Miami's Jonnu Smith. That's all for this edition. Make sure you subscribe on whatever podcast platform you make use of, or watch us on the Bills YouTube channel, because when you need to know about the Bills, you need to check Bills by the Numbers. For Steve Tasker, I'm Chris Brown. Thanks for listening. We'll catch you next time, everybody.